Hello, you are listening to the application guidance that has been pre-recorded specifically for the 2024 Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund application cycle. My name is Barb Pierce, DED Housing Specialist for the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund. On behalf of the department, thank you for taking time to review this guidance for applications during the 2024 Trust Fund cycle. This recording will be kept on the Trust Fund's webpage until next year's cycle begins. Applicants should have already viewed the recorded pre-application guidance, as topics discussed there are likely not going to be repeated in this workshop. If you are viewing this as part of your preparation for the next funding cycle, just wanted to show you quickly that using the How to Apply AmpliFund Application User Guide will give you some information on how to use our AmpliFund portal. Every application must be applied for within that portal. Also, it's a good idea to review the application guidelines for the current cycle, and this will give you a lot of information to prepare you for the next cycle. And if you'd like to download a PDF of an application that was used in the most current cycle, you can do that. Choose which PDF you'd like to download so you get an idea of the questions that are in the application. These do change a little bit slightly from year to year, but it will give you a very good foundation to use in making your planning. This is just a reminder of who eligible applicants are, especially if you are watching this in preparation for the next cycle. Take a moment to pause this if you need to review who are eligible applicants, and the requirement for 501c3 and C4 is to upload an IRS letter of determination of tax exempt status. Also, you can partner with for-profit developers and others, but please read through that. And lastly, all applicants must be registered to do business within the state of Nebraska and be listed on the Secretary of State's website. Applicants will be able to find some additional resources as guidance as well. As mentioned earlier, the pre-application recorded guidance is very important to watch before starting an application. Pre-applications are required. Application guidelines are also on the Trust Fund's webpage. Always check for the latest version that's been uploaded on the webpage and see the record of change if you have already downloaded a previous version. There are also frequently asked questions. You will find the first set of frequently asked questions within the application guidelines. Then, as questions come in, they are posted on our frequently asked questions portal under the Q&A box that you will find on the Trust Fund webpage. If you wish to submit a question, there's a form there for submitting a question, and a housing program representative will reply. There is also a supplement slide deck with slides that have information that may be helpful to you as you are going through the application process. And there are open office hours that are scheduled. You will find their dates and times in the application guidelines on page 4. If open office hours contain any slides, those will be gathered and included under training and workshop section. Housing priorities are identified for every cycle. Please take a moment to read through the housing priorities for this cycle found on section 2.1 of the 2024 application guidelines. Every project must be willing to serve incomes of 120% or less area median income. If your project does not meet one of the priorities, we still encourage you to apply, as the final award determinations are influenced by the number of applications, the amount of funding available, the mix of project types, objective, subjective, and pro forma evaluations. It's important for applicants to be aware that program guidelines need to be created and uploaded to Form 3 of their full application. The program guidelines are one of the most time-intensive pieces of a trust fund application. Please follow directions in the application itself for how to download a program guidelines checklist from the trust fund's webpage. You will use that checklist to make sure you have covered all the necessary items that need to be included in your program's guidelines. Please contact your housing program representative if you have any questions, but we highly recommend this as being one of the first pieces you work on when getting ready to apply. Also, the program guidelines will be used to answer several questions within the application itself. This slide is showing a portion of the cash match documentation form, which must be downloaded from the trust fund webpage, completed on an organization's letterhead, and submitted as part of the application if an applicant is committing match. Cash match is not a requirement for projects. However, applicants with housing development projects that are providing cash match as part of their application are joining DED in the investment of resources and risk, and therefore the applicant is awarded points. There is a place in the application, in the cash match form where applicants can state the source of their cash match. For example, a cash match might come from the applicant's operating funds, or a specially designated housing fund, or maybe a non-DED housing grant which was won by the applicant for use in housing. It's important to read this form carefully. If awarded, the signer is agreeing that the applicant will place the amount of unrestricted cash match into a designated project fund owned by the applicant within 30 days of receiving the notice of award letter. These designated match funds will be used by the applicant organization to pay for match-funded activities. The cash match may not be a loan or repaid to the applicant or repaid to another organization. It must remain in the trust fund's project for the duration of the contract period. Also, cash match should not be confused with leverage, which is also entered into the leverage table. Cash match is not to be entered as an amount on the leverage table. For purposes of the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the definition of leverage are any non-trust fund resources used for funding the hard costs of a primary and/or a support activity during the open contract period. Trust fund resources are not intended to fund entire projects. When private investment is included into a project, that will be scored as a percent of the total development cost. Total development cost is trust fund request plus cash match plus the leverage amount. Some examples of leverage could include a bank line of credit, non-DED awards, private investment, and owner equity. Please review the bulleted list of what should not be included when filling out the leverage table of the application. Also, a for-profit entity that will own the completed units must participate in the project financing by providing a minimum of 10% of the amount of trust fund's non-administrative assistance and doing so as owner equity. This should be clearly listed in the Proforma Packets Sources and Uses section. Some additional tips regarding leverage when filling out your application. Of course, remember to complete the leverage table. Also, you may wish to supplement the application with leverage commitment letters that can be uploaded at the end of Form 4 in the applicant-specific uploads for project financing. This can serve to make your application much stronger to show that you do have definite commitments and collaboration with others. The leverage table should be aligning with your project Proforma packet. Also, pre-development costs are an important part of your project story. They are not leverage and should not be on the leverage table. However, there is a pre-development question in Form 4 that you can fill out listing your pre-development costs. You could also mention pre-development costs in the application's project description summary in Form 2. When filling out your full application, please be sure to refer to Section 9 of the 2024 Application Guidelines. This is specific to the housing development application and will walk through every section of the application and the additional details there can be helpful when filling out your application. This slide lists some tips from the DED housing team. Be sure to name your application correctly. There is a score for that. So check out the pre-application recorded guidance or check out the application guidelines. There are instructions for how to name your application correctly. Also, build the budget as instructed. Again, the pre-application recorded guidelines goes over the budget creation. One thing about the budget is that it should be made up only of your trust fund request and also match. Review the application guidelines carefully as you go through your application. Review the recorded guidance and workshops. Review the 2024 frequently asked questions and check back from time to time for new ones that are being added. Also, use a proofreader to catch mistakes in the application before you submit. Give consistent answers across the whole application. Be concise with your answers. And here are some DED housing team tips for planning a project. So create a project that is ready to go as soon as release of funds is granted. It's very important to DED that you take into consideration the application period of time, the notice of award coming in the fall, and then the time it takes to get through contract review and special conditions. But once release of funds is granted, it is expected that every project will begin to spend their costs right away and begin to submit payment requests on a regular basis every 3 months after release of funds. Some ways to create a ready-to-go project is to have the site under control or owned by the applicant or project partners at time of application, to make sure zoning is in place, to have architectural designs ready to go, to have a pro forma packet that is solid and is based on well-informed cost amounts or actual bids that have been received. Put together a strong project team with experience and skills needed to make the project a success. And of course, set up a meeting with your program housing representative to discuss your project. Projects that typically perform well during the application cycle are ones that align with the housing priorities, which are described in the qualified allocation plan and application guidelines for that cycle. They also have included cash match and leveraged funds, and they demonstrate an intent to revolve the trust funds through the use of loans to the developers, the home buyers, or the homeowners. They also demonstrate a level of local government support and participation and a capacity of having housing development experience. They also will have a history of timely use of the trust fund's resources when an applicant has been a previous recipient. When filling out your project description summary in the application on Form 2, be sure to refer to Section 9 of the application guidelines. This is a list of many of the items that should be included in the project description summary, which will give reviewers a very well-rounded understanding of your project. Also found in Form 2 of the application is the organization description summary. Be sure to refer to this checklist, also found on Section 9 application guidelines, to include important information that will help reviewers to understand your organization and its ability to carry out this project. A project performa packet is required for several of the project types. Use this screen to check to see if your project type requires a performa. Also, a reminder that all rental projects must use the 2024 rental Excel spreadsheet that is downloaded from the Trust Fund's webpage. No previous performa Excel spreadsheets from previous years will be accepted. So be sure you go to the Trust Fund's webpage and download the 2024 rental Excel spreadsheet. If your project is a rental project, I want to bring to your attention to be sure to check out page 3 of the rental program guidelines checklist. Page 3 of that checklist gives information for completing the rental proforma that is also downloaded and is a required proforma for all rental projects. When creating the budget for your trust fund application, please refer to section 9.8 of the application guidelines. This screen shows a few of the tips that are shown in section 9.8, but be sure to review it so that you are able to create your budget correctly. Remember that only trust fund requested activities are to be included in the trust fund's budget on the application. Any leverage sources that you have put into the leverage table on the application will be shown in your proforma, but not on the trust fund budget. Also, cash match is included on the trust fund's budget that you are creating in the application and should be connected to the activity that you are applying it to. A couple last tips for you. Save often while you're within the application, just to avoid any loss of input. If you are walking away from the Amplifund platform and have not hit saved, it does time out and you would lose what you had input on that particular form. If a question has an asterisk next to it, it means it's required and the application won't let you proceed or submit without fulfilling all required areas. So if the question does not apply to your project type but has an asterisk, either enter a 0 if it's a number field or an NA for not applicable in order to proceed. Also remember to download your completed application before you hit submit. If your project involves rehabilitation of housing that was built prior to 1978, please review the Q&A pamphlet that is found on the Trust Fund's webpage underneath Application Guidelines and review the needed parts of the state of Nebraska statutes that your project would apply to. Notice the state of Nebraska has a different definition for abatement and the requirements of abatement than does the National Environmental Protection Agency. The trust fund does not follow the NEPA requirements, but we do follow all requirements that are under Nebraska statute. So this pamphlet should be helpful, but if you have additional questions on figuring out whether or not you truly need the lead-based paint allowance for testing and assessments, you may contact DHHS directly, and there's an email and phone number on here as well as in the Q&A pamphlet itself. So before I end, I have just a few reminders. Mark your calendars for March 21st. If your project requires a site review, housing program representatives must receive your site review form by March 21st in order to have time to do an approval of the site and have you include that in your application guidelines, which is a factor of readiness. The application is due Thursday, May 9th at 5 o'clock. Please do not wait to the last day to submit. Kind of plan your timing and your calendar out. We recommend 2 days ahead just in case there are technical difficulties. Also, stay informed. Join the mailing list. The DED mailing list link is found at the bottom of every DED webpage. So, of course, at the bottom of the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund webpage, there is a Join Our Mailing List link. Be sure to sign up for the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund email list, but there are others there that you can also choose to stay informed about. There will be virtual open office hours on March 14th and April 11th. Those who have submitted pre-applications may register. You can also submit questions to the Q&A portal that's on the Trust Fund webpage. The open office hours will focus on questions specific to completing the full application. If you have project-specific questions, we urge you to set up a meeting with your housing program representative to discuss your project. If you are having any issues with setting up an applicant portal in Amplifund, or you are having glitches within the Amplifund portal while you are completing your application, please use one of these ways to contact Amplifund customer support directly. You can call, you can do an online chat, or you can email. If you do email, we recommend CCing your housing program representative so they're aware of your issues. But Amplifund's customer support is there to help you when you are experiencing troubles using the Amplifund system. This concludes the pre-recorded guidance for the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund's Housing Development Application. Thank you for listening. If you have additional questions, please contact the Housing Program Representative for your region.